That's an excellent question, Jeremy. Um, I'm an immigrant to Canada. I was a war resister. Initially, I planned to go to prison in the States, but realized I'd have to be a tax resistor after I got out for refusing to cooperate with the draft. And at that point, I decided to see about coming to Canada and was accepted. I came as a hired hand on a dairy farm, and then a few years later bought a small farm of my own. And as a young farmer in the 1970s, it was the time of the Arab oil embargo, and energy prices quadrupled and then they doubled again. So that was a hugely inflationary force in the economy because society depends on energy, and if energy prices go up by 8 times, uh, that's a big cost all across the economy. But the government of the day, which was a liberal government, was fighting that terrible inflation with high interest rates, which made the inflation even worse because now anybody who borrowed money is getting hit with additional expenses. So that seemed absolutely nuts to me. In 1979, the Conservatives formed the government and the Liberals were now in the opposition. And it was like they traded their speeches when they traded places in the House. Now the Conservatives, who had been attacking the high interest rate policy, defended it. The Liberals were now attacking it. It's just like, what's going on here? This doesn't make any sense. And then it was revealed that the banks gave $50,000 to the Liberals and $50,000 to the Conservatives. That was 50 years ago, basically, when $50,000 was a lot more money in terms of its impact. And the NDP wouldn't accept money from banks or big business. And Ed Broadbent, who was the leader at the time, was talking about a made in Canada interest rate policy and renewable energy. That if we really wanted to fight inflation that was caused by fossil fuel price escalation, then we needed to become more efficient with our energy use, and we needed to transfer to other more renewable energy sources. And we had built a passive solar home in the mid-70s. We were very concerned about energy and being more efficient, so it made complete sense to me. And so when the 1980 election was looming, I'd gotten to know some new Democrats through my environmental involvement and my social activism. And they were good people. And so I called up one of my friends and said, Fran and I would like to help. And he said, well, how would you like to be the candidate? And we're like, whoa. But the next day he brought me out the policy book and 2 political histories of Canada. And as I read them over, I appreciated that the NDP was the voice and conscience that had made Canada the kind of country I really liked and believed in as an immigrant. And so I ended up running as the candidate in the 1980 election. So the NDP expresses, at its best, expresses my belief that we're a community and that we're part of the environment and that we have to look after both of those, and that those are the important things in life. I don't have my cake chart behind me, but it's I don't know if you've seen it in any of the stuff I've done, but we have a very perverse understanding of how the world works at the moment, and we're destroying the world that we need to live in. So that's the concern that got me to run for the leadership.
What is the kind of country you'd like to see Canada become, and what would you bring to Parliament as the leader of the NDP?
Well, I have written up a holistic goal for Canada, and I will send it to you. Because before I decided to run, I contacted my personal contact list, which includes local New Democrats and people I've worked with in environmental stuff, and my Quaker meeting group, and that. I asked them, what was important to them? What would they like to see Canada be? Because I've been teaching a holistic management for a number of years now, and it involves saying, what's the quality of life you want? What's the vision of where you'd like to get to? And what do you need to, how do you need to behave? And what do you need to do to get to both of those things? So it's a very helpful framework for thinking about making decisions. And we help define our future every day when we make decisions, we make choices. Am I going to, eat a fast food thing, or am I going to eat some carrots and, a bit of an apple? That impacts our health, and much bigger decisions impact our future. So I'll email that to you. I've got your email address. But in terms of quality of life, what I say, as a country, we meet the basic needs for water, food, shelter, clothing, healthcare, and education for every Canadian resident. So that's everyone living in Canada, whether they're a foreign agricultural worker, somebody's grandparent who's not a citizen, whatever. If we're living here together, we need to look after each other. Everyone has access to fresh air, clean water, and healthy green space. Everyone has time and energy for themselves, their families, their friends, and their occupation. Everyone has an opportunity to contribute and be involved in their community. And then the vision, the longer-term vision, is Canada is a caring, compassionate country, both to its residents at home and to the broader world community. We make decisions carefully, considering their impact on the planet, the people, and the economy. The earth is healing, communities are thriving, and conflict at home and abroad is decreasing. And so then the rest of it gets into the systems and behaviors, the things we need to do to try and help make that happen and make it real. What I bring to this is over 50 years of experience as a farmer, not quite 50 years of experience as a father, and less than that as a grandfather. I bring 45 years of experience working politically in a rural riding in Ontario, helping build membership, build the riding association, running as a candidate in that riding, managing campaigns in that riding. And I also bring experience. I was the executive assistant to the Ontario Minister of Agriculture in the early 1990s, and I was a school board trustee for 3 terms. So I've been involved in representing people, trying to put forward and make choices that make changes and work for the community. So that's sort of what I bring, and I bring my holistic management experience and my involvement in various community groups and building organizations. My wife and I helped found the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario in the late 70s, and I've helped form some other organizations as well. And I also, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I'm also currently on the board of directors of Holistic Management Canada, taking a leave of absence for this campaign, and on Farmers for Climate Solutions, which is a coalition of about 30 farm and land-based organizations that are wanting to figure out how we build more resilience and capacity to both deal with the challenges of a changing climate, but also help reduce the impact and reduce the consequences of carbon release by working with our land to build topsoil and sequester carbon and make our farms and ranches more resilient.
How has it been actually campaigning for these roles in the NDP?
Well, I did not run federally in 2025. I ran federally in 2019, and in 2008, and on back through the years, because I've run 5 times federally and twice provincially. In terms of gearing up for this campaign, it's been a bit of a challenge because if the party had just used the rate of inflation to create the entrance fee for the leadership candidates, we'd have been around $38,000, but they set $100,000, entry fee, and they're taking a 25% administrative fee on top of that. So really, a candidate has to raise $133,000 to participate. And for somebody like myself, who's a rank and file New Democrat, who's been working at the local level for over 40 years, 45 years, but has not got a big social media following or is well known at the moment, we've had to build a campaign. I've been very, very fortunate that a number of young people are attracted to the 4 R's that I've been talking about, which are representation, regeneration, redistribution, and redesign. And the first 3 were ones I talked about in the 2019 election. But we've been building a team, but there's a very short timeline, just a bit over a month, to raise the first quarter of that money to stay in the race, and that's what we're working on right now. But I'm also encouraging people to donate to their local riding association, because the motto of our campaign is from the ground up, and that we have to rebuild the party from the ground up. And the other thing that I'm talking about is we need to reach out not just to the current New Democrats, but to people I would call the New Democrats. And that's the people who are part of the 99% of the population who aren't part of the ruling billionaire class at the moment. And, ordinary working people. Some of them are in unions, some of them aren't in unions, and some of them aren't even waged because they're looking after a family member, or they're looking after the kids at home, or helping them coach. We all contribute to the community. And if you use the cake chart, which has nature, the family, and the community, and then the public sector, then the private sector, our current economic thinking only measures those top 2 layers. It doesn't measure those other ones that are so important. But the thing is, we have to rebuild from the ground up, and we have to reach out to the 50% of the people who've stopped voting because the political system pisses them off because it's not working for them and not making the world better for them. And then we also need to reach out, I think, to disillusioned liberals and concerned conservatives. Disillusioned liberals who are tired of being told one thing before elections and then seeing something very different afterwards, and concerned conservatives who don't think a pit bull approach to politics is going to build the kind of community that we want to have.
In the last federal election, the NDP had its weakest results since its creation, winning just 7 seats. What's your plan to rebuild, to reintroduce the party in a way that will restore confidence among voters who?
Well, I don't think that would. I don't think the 2025 election was. I would call it the Trump terror election. People and it was the failure of a first past the post electoral system. The first past the post electoral system has been in place since Confederation, and it was the party of the elites, the conservatives and the liberals, before ordinary people had a chance to vote. It wasn't until after the First World War that women got the vote, and that working men, people who didn't have significant ownership of property, actually were able to vote. And they got to vote, but with the first past the post system, the United Farmers, the Independent Labor Movement, the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, the New Democratic Party, now the New Democrats and the Green, have always been at a terrible disadvantage. And the liberals and conservatives are really quick to say, don't waste your vote on the Greens or the NDP. They don't have a chance in this riding, so just, you have to pick between one of us. That's not the way democracy is supposed to work, and it's certainly not the way you create a healthy democracy where you have everybody at the table representing the public in the way that the public votes, and then you have the opportunity to try and what I would call find our collective wisdom. If you have everybody at the table and they're there in the proportion that the public wants it. The other thing that lets happen is that as public beliefs and perspectives shift, then you can make transitions more gradually around that majority position that's properly represented in Parliament. But that's not what we have today. What we had in the 2025 election was Pierre Poilievre looking an awful lot like Donald Trump threatening tariffs, and Mark Carney saying, I'm the one to do this. A whole whack of progressive people voted for the Liberals out of fear of Trump and Poilievre. And we lost a whole lot of really progressive members of Parliament. And the NDP could have done a better job in that election. But when you have those kind of fear and political current shifts, your title shifts, it's very awkward. but I think what we have to be doing is talking about what I would call the delusional thinking of our ruling class. I took environmental studies while I was starting to farm, and we knew back in the 70s that we'd seen the picture of the planet from the Apollo missions, right? Here's this beautiful little blue and green globe floating in space with this tiny thin layer of atmosphere and this little biological layer of green plants and living animals. And we knew you can't keep growing energy and resource use infinitely on that without destroying it. We knew that 50 years ago. But the economists believe you can make stuff out of nothing because that's what they do. Money is a creation. It's not real. What you buy with money is real. What you do for money is real. Your work is real. But money itself is, it's not cowrie shells. Cowrie shells are real. Maybe they were one of the early currencies. But today, we're living in a fantasy world where we think we can keep expanding and growing the economy and not have very serious consequences. When I was in university, I came across a book called Conquest of the Land for 7,000 years. And what it was a U.S. Department of Agriculture fellow went to the cradles of civilization, and what he found were depleted soils and big stone buildings that were now empty and abandoned because the land had collapsed ecologically because they'd overused it. Well, now, unfortunately, in the last 500 years with colonialism, we've had conquest of the planet, and now with capitalist consumer corporate expansionism, we're having, last 100 years, an intensification of that conquest. And it's not going to end nicely unless we change how we're doing it. And that's why the second R of regeneration is part of it, and also the fourth R of redesign. And the middle R of redistribution is we've had a system that's been accumulating wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And we need to create a distributive economy. One of the things I've been using to illustrate it is it's really hard for people to get their heads around the difference between a million and a billion. If you write it, you're writing an M or a B in front of the letters. If you write it out in numerals, you add 3 zeros. But Jeremy, if I told you had 1 million seconds to live, you'd have 11 days. And if I told you Owen had 1 billion seconds to live, he'd have 31 more years. That seems a little out of proportion. I think you both should have maybe about 60 to 70, maybe 80 more years to live, and share the world between you so that it doesn't fall apart.
In recent years, under Jagmeet Singh's leadership, some supporters and members of parliament, candidates with the NDP have been, sometimes they express disappointment with the party. Is there anything you think that you could have done, or any other leader could have done differently to Singh's leadership? And what yourself would you have done differently?
Well, that's a good question. I guess my experience as an organic farmer is that people have there's a great diversity of people, and there's a great diversity in the way people's bodies respond to different things in the environment. We have people who come to get food from our farm who are very sensitive to chemicals and who want food that's grown without any pesticides or chemical fertilizers, that sort of thing, and make huge efforts. I'm fortunately pretty omnivorous and able to eat pretty much anything, but it's really helped me appreciate that when people tune into their bodies, and we need to honor people's concerns for their bodies. And I think that the situation with COVID was very divisive for the country, very divisive for families. It was divisive within our own family at times, and I think figuring out ways that keep people safe but don't trample on their sense of personal agency is pretty critical. And working with communities, working with um, individuals, trying to set up systems where people can behave responsibly, so that instead of being told you've got to do this, they say I want to do this because it's helping to protect my neighbors, and build that sense of community and mutual support and protection with the best information we have. And one of the interesting things I like about holistic management, it says that you make the best decisions you have with the best information you have, and then you monitor it so that you keep evaluating, is this information that I thought it was correct? Is it taking me in the direction I want to go of that holistic goal? And so then you modify things over time. So I think that we're in an interesting state, particularly with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence and algorithms can be pretty effective at dealing with complicated situations, because complicated situations or complicated machinery respond to rules and can be schematized and laid out, and you can figure out, if you pull off this wire, it stops. If you put the wire back on, it starts. Things are pretty linear in how they interact. Human relationships, human dynamics, and the environment are very complex. There are a lot of interacting bits and pieces, and what you do at one time may seem to have wonderful results, and you think the same thing again, and it doesn't turn out because too many other factors have changed and they're different. So, with AI, we want to be very careful that we don't try and use it in inappropriate places, and that if we're going to use it, that we don't just use it to make the rich richer again. We need to spread the value of it out throughout the community. But the issue of, as I've been saying to people, I'm not interested in fighting for you. A lot of political talk is about, we're going to fight for you. I'm not interested in fighting. We have enough violent imagery and that kind of nonsense. I'm interested in working for you, and I'm interested even more in working with you. And we are going to disagree on occasion, and that's going to be real. But I think if you have a clear set of values of where are you trying to get to, like the holistic goals, and you have a decision-making process that helps you look at it from an environmental perspective, from a social perspective, ask the question, well, what's the root cause? If you're trying to solve a problem or deal with something, what's the real root cause of this issue? Because you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to deal with symptoms and never get anywhere, because you're not dealing with the root cause of the problem or the challenge you're dealing with. So that's what the holistic management part of my experience would bring that to the discussion. And I don't know. It's as I say, I worked for the Minister of Agriculture as his executive assistant. I was a school board trustee for 3 terms. I think it was Abraham Lincoln said, you can please some of the people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you can't please all of the people all of the time. And at this stage, with the way our political system has gotten polarized, in part because of the first past the post system, giving people a sense that they are not well represented, that their vote doesn't count, we have a very polarized system. And unfortunately, there are politicians who play to it, because with the first past this post system, they benefit. If they can shift 2 or 3% of the population to vote for them, they can end up with a phony majority government where 38 or 39 or 40% of the popular vote gives them more than 50% of the seats in the House and 100% control of the House for the next 4 years. Terrible system, and leads to policy lurch and great waste, and certainly doesn't lead to a effective coalescing around the majority view in Parliament. Well, thank you so much for your interest, and I hope it continues, and I hope we can build a green progressive movement that will seem to make sense to you. And I will send you the holistic goal with a bit of background on holistic management.